Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys for being able to call in today. See the number of participants is quickly rising. I appreciate everyone for giving us an hour of their time. Wanted to formally introduce myself. My name is David Osei. I am currently the chair for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group. We really racked our brains and thought of different ways where we can create value for all the participants within our modern work setting, working from remotely and working from home. We wanted to introduce this series that allow people to be able to call in and listen to two great speakers on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And today we have the first episode of the DEI summer series titled Diversity and Thought, where we wanted to give you practical, valuable lessons learned and insight on the way you can rethink DEI, but more importantly, how you can sort of think about DEI moving forward, how you can create value for your individual companies, but then also for your broader ecosystem or general community that you either work in or live in. That being said, here's a quick agenda. We're really going to try to go through introductions relatively quickly. Then we're going to go right into rethinking DEI, the current state of DEI, and DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion. So pause if you have any questions surrounding that. And what makes an inclusive leader, what we are doing, and then going through moments of sponsorship versus mentorship. Then we're going to round out with Q&A. Earlier, please pause if you have any questions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll answer them as they come through. Really quickly about me, I reside in Washington, D.C., originally from New York City. Like I mentioned earlier, I am the chair for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion group with the task force within WBC. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon 5 years ago with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And some of my favorite hobbies include chess, traveling, cooking, watching TV, more geared sort of surrounded around chess. I fell in love with the game at a very early age, and I have been playing it ever since. And my pronouns are he, him, his. So I'm going to transition over to Dianna to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So glad you could join us. For those of you that don't know me, I am an attorney with Fox Rothschild in the Government Contracts Compliance Division. I specialize in federal construction. Prior to going to law school, I worked for Yates Construction in their federal division, running their federal compliance for both themselves and all of their affiliates and joint ventures and subsidiaries. After being on the road for a few years, I realized that I wanted to travel less and focus a little more on family. And I thought if I got my law degree, I could do more of what I was doing on a bigger scale. And so I enjoy working with construction companies, specifically those that are in the federal arena. And I also round out a little bit of that with some bankruptcy experience, specializing in making sure that you are able to preserve and protect your rights as companies are going through that process. I reside in McLean, Virginia, and I am happy to be working in the DC area. Let me introduce Connor.
Thanks, Diana. Hello, my name is Connor Jenkins. I am calling in from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm super excited to be here. I am the growth marketing manager at NextPoint, and NextPoint is a pioneer in the cloud-based legal technology industry, and we work with law firms across the nation and across the globe, whether it be construction firms, mass tort and class action firms, government agencies, and law firms of all sizes to automate their e-discovery processes, as well as they go to trial, make sure that they're using the best technology to present their case and win their cases. I'm very passionate about the power of digital activism to catalyze very long needed change in the communities that I work in, especially here in Chicago. And so that manifests itself in the work that I do with Howard Brown Health Center here locally in Chicago, They're they're an incredible organization if you don't know about them, who is committed to providing LGBTQ affirming primary care, STI and STD testing, HIV/AIDS access to services, as well as trans gender non-confirming healthcare and women's healthcare services through clinics and policy making. And so I love the volunteer work that I do with them, as well as the work that I do with Tech for Campaigns, which is this incredible organization where I volunteer my digital marketing skills to work in easily flippable local districts. And so I am coming up on my third election cycle this fall, working with them. And if you would like to learn more about them, especially, I can pass along some information, but my pronouns are he, him, his, and we're super happy to be here and share this with you all.
Appreciate the nice intro. So the first question we wanted to ask to the group is, what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why is it important? And for me, it's a passion. So I grew up in New York, where it's almost like a salad bowl. Not quite a melting pot, but like a salad bowl where you can find diversity, equity, and inclusion in all kind of corners of New York City. And growing up, I've always had a very, multifaceted background. I went to a PWI. I grew up in Harlem, and I've seen almost pretty much all spectrums of, the different diverse communities that you can be a part of. And for me, it's more passion. And I've seen that a driver for success, if you really want to get technical, KPIs for success. Sorry, come again?
Oh, do you have?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
What is diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why is it important? For me, it's more driving force. And I've seen that the most successful endeavors I've challenged is ones that involve diverse groups and diverse inclusion. And it's important for the fabric of our society that we live in. It's easy to sort of silo yourself and look around and try to be, individualistic, but it really takes a champion to look around the room and sort of stand up for people that aren't, that don't look like you, sound like you, or create like an inclusive space where people feel welcome. So I'm going to let Dianne continue to talk more about her role and why diversity and inclusion is important to her.
Absolutely, David. So coming from the construction industry, my heart has really truly been with small business and helping small businesses grow and maximizing opportunities for those communities that are socially and economically underserved. So this kind of, I feel like DEI really fits right into that, that heart of supporting local small businesses. And I think, gone are the days where we saw this really in regional pockets, like you would see it in federal construction. Now we're starting to see it in private construction. You're seeing companies like Amazon and Tesla and big manufacturers where they're demanding that construction companies, maximize these opportunities for small and diverse businesses. And with that, I think along with some of the social justice framework that's occurring in the last several years, it's no longer a regional issue. This is a national issue, and we're seeing it more on that platform. And I think communities and the public as a whole, they're standing by and they want to know what your company is going to do about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's an important time for companies to start, building that brand and that voice and coming out and ensuring that everyone's heard. And it's no longer just one voice. I think everyone has an opportunity to make an impact and to speak up.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
It's no longer just one single person's role at a company. It's a mindset. It is a process that touches every part of the business and every person at the business. And it impacts the way not only that you show up in your work, but also the way that you show up outside of work. These are conversations that you're not only having in meeting rooms, these are conversations you're having at the happy hour after. And so as DEI has come to the forefront, These are no longer conversations. These are now actions that we can take. And hopefully with this presentation, we can give you a few tangible things that you can take back to your companies. And like Diana said, this is an ever evolving conversation. There's no one right way of doing this, and there's no one person who is dedicated to that. And so it's a complex issue, but it's an exciting time to be a part of this change in our industry and in this country, truly. And so every person can truly take on and champion these issues.
Yeah, and just off that vein, we wanted to give you just some, but more visual slides of where we think DEI is. It really is not a fad or compliance requirement or a singular role like Connor was mentioning. It really is a mindset, and how do we sort of think about the longevity of growth within this diverse ecosystem. It's more, how do we sort of train our brains to sort of see the value in diversity and work towards it, as opposed to checking something off on a box. So we'd like to encourage you, everyone on the call, to think about the different ways that diversity, equity, and inclusion has been approached in the past, and compare it to how we can sort of evolve and create more a mindset.
And I think, David, with that, it's not just internal to your company. It really is, earlier you said it's about your ecosystem, your community. This is really something that is for the broader public. It's a hot button issue, especially with race and social justice. And I think it's something that if your company is not forward thinking, it's going to lose its relevance. Mm-hmm. So Connor, I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit as far as some of these terms that we're hearing when you hear DEI, and maybe talk about the misconceptions.
Yeah, I think this slide is helpful, especially just to understand what is not DEI, and then what are the things that are true DEI, and the work that we're doing. This is, like David said, this is not just a blip on the radar. This is not something in which we're simply reacting to what's happening in the news. This is a continual process and a long-term investment, not only in your employees and your executives and in your company, but in the betterment of your business. It's been proven that DEI initiatives improve your productivity. They decrease your rate of absenteeism at work. It's something that is continual investment, and it's a process for rethinking the way in which you do business.
So Connor, for a question for you, what is the current state of DEI in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think we have a few stats here to help us.
So here we have a couple slides if you want to run through them real quick, Connor.
Totally. So the state of DEI in the workplace is that for our construction industry, we have 10 million in the workforce. And of those, 9.1% are women, 10.7% are Black or African American, and 24.5% are Hispanic or Latino. And when you look at pay parity, women are making 86 cents on the dollar compared to men. And the average age is 38 years old. This age number especially is something that, Diana, you were talking about earlier, around just the ever-changing age makeup of specifically the construction industry and how it's ever-changing.
Well, it definitely tells us where it's trending. And so I think what's important to note is, in order for us, as an industry to continue to grow and be successful, first and foremost, we are built on our people. That is our greatest asset. And it's also, a lot of times for many companies, it's their biggest headache. And I think part of this is, if you work in the construction industry, you can work for any construction company doing something very similar to what you probably do now. And so it's not so much about what you do, it's about who you do it with. So I think, the things that we need to be concentrating and focusing on are, what are the trends telling us? The trends are telling us that our workforce is getting older. And this is not an industry where it's not like being a lawyer where we can practice into our 70s. It's something that it does take a manual toll on your physical well-being. And so I think we need to encourage younger people to take this route. And I know for those of you that were in the 90s, there was this huge push for people to step away from blue collar work and have this American dream of going to college and getting a college degree and being the first person in your family to have it. There was this, large push that I felt, in the 90s. And I can tell you that it really did us a disservice, because now we are really struggling and we're having significant shortages when you look at these, blue collar trades, such as, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And I don't know where we're going to find the workforce to fill it, but part of that, these challenges is not only are we going to have to find a workforce, but we need to find a workforce that is representative of our communities and looks like the people we serve. So I think, we definitely have a long road ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree. I really truly do feel like we have a long, sort of road ahead. And being on the developer side, the trend that we've been seeing for a while is lack of skilled labor. And I think to be able to address that, one, there needs to be more conversation surrounding how do we integrate younger workforce individuals with older, more skilled and knowledgeable individuals, where there's inclusion in how do we pass that information sort of forward, or I guess backwards in the scenario, so the up and coming younger individuals feel comfortable within their own skin to either be able to do a job that's in front of them or have the necessary skills. And that really, I see these numbers, even though they're ugly, as like an opportunity. There's always room for growth, and when we diversify our groups that we work within, I would love to see it be 20% women, or 30% African American or Black, or 30% Latino. And as we grow those numbers, using this as an opportunity, we can really start to drain that number from 38 back down to where we can, sort of like Dianna was mentioning, maybe there should be less of a shift to schooling and more of a shift towards trade school, and emphasizing livable wages, becoming a plumber, an HVAC, or mechanical person. And I think there's room to grow, but if we're really, really keen on growing, we really got to start getting these numbers up within our own ecosystem or within our own cycle. So teaching our kids that it's very acceptable and even sort of good that you want to become a plumber, or that you want to become an HVAC technician, or that you want to be a landscaper, and sort of emphasizing those key conversations, and emphasizing, hey, there's room for you to live a very normal life. You don't have to go to a 4-year. Maybe we have the conversation of attending, a 2-year college, and then following that with some trade school, and really getting on your feet within those things.
It's not just the cultivation of the skills of our diverse workforce. It's making sure that our leaders are diverse and there's representation within our leadership. If we go to the next slide, you can see that that we saw that 25% of that 10 million strong workforce were Hispanic or Latino. But it's devastating here to see that just only 2.2% are on board seats. And they're the fastest growing ethnicity in America. And they're not equitably represented in leadership, especially within the construction industry. And so we have to realize that there's already gaps in that representation, not only in our workforce, but how do we bring that representation within leadership so that our workforce has leaders that are representative of who they are as people. And so that gap in representation of diverse leaders in companies, we can see also on the board level, on the executive board level. Close to 200 of S&P 500 companies have zilch Black members on them. That is devastating. How can we continue to share in the workforce and cultivate these skills so that not only does our workforce look representative of the ecosystems that we live in, but our leadership as well.
And I think, Connor, that's so important to encouraging the youth, because a lot of times our youth, they're looking up, they're looking into, now obviously the media platforms have changed over the years. Now we have all sorts of things. I find my kids are on Reddit and everything else. And I think that it's important to highlight and showcase leaders that fall within these communities so that they can be the shining stars that people look up to and say, I want to be like this person. If they can do that, I can do that too. And I think, we may start off with one person, and sometimes you hear this term, hey, he's our token guy, and it has a negative sounding effect. We need to flip the script on that. And we need to turn around and say, look, you're not going to be you're going to go from, being abused and placed into this role to empowered and that person that's going to spark change. And it happens one person at a time. So like David mentioned, this is a process. No one's got the end all be all on how to do it and how to do it right. But I think the key thing here is that we're all willing to engage in this conversation, which is why we're here.
So we have a question from Mr. Kevin Lugo. In this question, the Latino community is especially involved in the general construction industry. What is the data for C-suite or construction companies? Does it follow the same trend as the S&P 500?
I'd have to look into this. We actually got this information from Forbes, and I'd have to see if their data that they produced when they did the S&P review, if it included a breakdown specifically into construction. But I can tell you across the board, looking at some of the largest companies in the country, it is a struggle, and they are making it seems like we're standing still. And if we're standing still, we're actually going backwards. So I think it's important that we all build this awareness and encourage others within our organizations to step up and be willing to take on the role as a leader. It's not always easy to be the one telling everyone else what to do. It comes with a lot of responsibility, and sometimes, not everyone's excited about all the additional weight that comes with that work.
I love what you just said, Diana. If we're standing still, we're actually going backwards. I think that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. And I goes, really opportune with the next slide. Opportunity by the numbers. So if we're standing still, these are some of the things, low-hanging fruit, yes, but deep impact is also, yes. Increasing women hired, researching attrition rates, maintaining pay parity, and then by culture, just encouraging, paternal leave, providing transition, celebrating different cultures, and then creating value for all the people that, we work with on a regular basis. Connor, can you talk a little bit more about, what Next Point does in order to sort of facilitate this inclusiveness within the community?
Absolutely. So I love this by culture too, because culture often is so unsaid. It's very unspoken, but culture is something, culture is often brought into the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so how you hear this term of culture when we speak of diversity, but though culture is a part of diversity, they're not synonymous. These terms are not synonymous. Culture is learned, and it's shared by the members of a group, while diversity is descriptive of that group. If we break down diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is the what we're trying to achieve, and equity and inclusion is how we achieve that. Often organizations very much so want to start with, make sure that our marketing materials are representative of some of the diverse individuals in our company. But they select images that looked a bit more diverse than others. And so diversity is, yes, the goal that we want to accomplish, but how do we get that? How do we attain that? And that's through these tangibles here on the screen of providing well-translation forms in literature, celebrating religious traditions. One way in which Next Point does this is we have 2 religious floating holidays that people can use that are perhaps not some of the more like federal holidays, like Ramadan or Rosh Hashanah, but it allows those who are of all religious faiths to practice in a way in which is not only written and documented into our policies, but it's encouraged, especially around paternal and maternity leave. Are you creating a space in which when someone goes on paternity or maternity leave, they still don't have to check their computer? Are you creating a culture where, yes, you might have an unlimited PTO, but you actually take that PTO? And so one way in which Next Point does this, which actually, I don't want to skip ahead. So the next slide is around just what is an inclusive leader?
Well, before we hop over there, Connor, I just want to say, for those of you here, obviously we're all in the construction industry. I want to help you bring this home. So like, when you think about a culture of safety, you don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm safe. You have to practice it. You have to create checklists. You have to have a plan. You have to work the plan. So I think when you think about a culture for diversity, equity, and inclusion, you got to think that same way. You got to have a plan. You got to get a checklist. You got to talk about it. You can't just wake up and say it happens. It doesn't. It really takes active decision making and going out and actually doing something about it. So why don't you go ahead, Connor, and why don't you talk about what it takes to be an inclusive leader?
Yes, absolutely. So I think we can all think of the leader in our life that exemplifies an inclusive leader. We all had someone who brought us into a room that maybe we perhaps should not have been in, but the best leaders are inclusive leaders and allow you to show up authentically to work. As a queer person, this is especially important. And one way in which you can do this is by emphasize, and these are taken from the Harvard Business Review based on quantitative and qualitative studies, in which they encourage you to emphasize an emotional intelligence, have open dialogues on issues, and foster that inclusive environment, not only in just in the conversations that you have, but these show up when you're having a conversation about someone, and are you truly championing someone who's not in the room? Allow junior members into this conversation so they feel like they have a stake in the conversations in which we're having, and they can join in. I think often, especially as we read the news lately, it feels like we're in this alone, but you can really lean on those around you. You're not in this alone. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about us as a whole. And one way in which you can do this is by escape your department, escape those silos, and brainstorm new ways to manage a growing, diverse, and global workforce. Have those hard conversations and keep bringing up those hard conversations even once you've had them. And one way in which you can have these hard conversations is through radical candor. We practice this at Next Point, and we have sessions to where all leaders must read Radical Candor, but it's all about having open and honest dialogue on really hard conversations about compensation and the way in which you're rewarded in your job. Diana, I know that Fox does a few really cool things around this, around compensation and making sure that you're compensated for the time that you dedicate to DEI initiatives.
Absolutely. And if you want to flip to the next slide, I'm happy to share what Fox is doing. Fox really is trying to push the needle forward and be engaged in our communities to ensure that we really are providing the best service we can to our clients. And in order to do that, we need to have different perspectives so that we can really tackle issues. Some of the things that we're doing at Fox, for instance, we hired Kim Gatling as our Chief Director of Diversity and Inclusion. She actually sits on our executive committee. She has a vote in helping make sure that the decisions that our management is taking are in line with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think, for those of you that don't know, Fox is not, we're not just based here in DC. We have 29 offices across the US. We have almost 1,000 attorneys and probably another 1,000 in staff and paralegals. And so it's not a small organization, and it is a large ship, and it needs direction. And so by bringing in Kim Gatling and having someone who fills that role, always keeping diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront of conversations and decision-making and processes and policies, it really helps keep us honest. Additionally, on top of that, we have joined, I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's the Diversity Labs Mansfield Rule 5.0. And what this program is we are committing ourselves to ensuring that either women, people of diverse backgrounds, LGBT, every group and organization is having at least 30% of everyone we're putting into leadership positions and including in pitches. And I think that's important. I think it's important to try to capture everyone's voice and their perspective. And then as far, Connor, you asked, like, what are we doing to put like our money where our mouth is? For us, the billable hour is such an important thing on how we gauge and determine if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so what what Fox has done is they've said, hey, look, if you are doing something that's related to DEI activities, we're going to take those hours that we would normally consider them as community hours, which you don't get, an incentive, or it isn't analyzed in your bonus additional compensation, and we're going to take 50 of those hours and add those in for you. So it really shows that the firm wants to put their money where their mouth is and encourage you to be outspoken and to participate, and not just participate within the firm, but to participate within the community. So those are just a couple of the great things that Fox is doing, and we're really excited. And I can tell you, David used to work in our building, and we just outfitted it recently. And I can tell you, we're really taking a new perspective. Not only is DEI, is it something like that you do, it's also about where you are, and is where you are promoting what you do. And so what we've done is when we organized our new space, we said we want to take everyone's voice. We want someone from the associate group. We want someone from the paralegal team. We want to comment on what you want this new space to look like so you can be productive. And we really kind of went old school, and we put all of our younger attorneys in a space where they would not be forgotten. They're right in the heart of the space. We put all of the coffee, the snacks, every attorney who wants those things, which I don't know any attorney that can't operate without coffee. You go into that area, and all of a sudden you start creating organic conversations. And I'm sure Connor will talk about authenticity here in a second. It's important to come to work and to feel like you belong. And as much as we want to say, let's have that, let that happen on its own, that's the best way for it to work. Sometimes you gotta spark the engine, and you gotta create opportunities to engage. And that's kind of what this was. Connor, I don't know if you want to talk about what you've done over at NextPoint and how you guys are coming up with ideas to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, totally. So NextPoint is an incredibly fast-growing company. When I arrived, we were 33 people strong, and currently I think we're sitting around 80 with the hopes of hiring to 100 by the end of the year. And so unlike a lot of our competitors, we're entirely 100% bootstrapped with our growth, and that success can be attributed to the understanding of our clients' needs, our services, and our financials. But I would argue that the defining success of NextPoint's 20 years in the legal tech space has been the cultivation of our uniquely empowered internal culture. It informs the way that we approach our customers, the way we interact with our clients, the way we address the industry as a whole, and the way we engage with our work in a day-to-day. And so It's been definitely a challenge as we've grown to ensure that we bring DEI into the forefront of this growing organization. And one way in which we've done that is by creating a culture club that addresses not only health benefits, ways to better serve mental and physical health, but how can we better serve our BIPOC and LGBTQ plus employees? What are organizations that we want to work with and improve our standing in the community and ensure that we're engaging with the community around us? And then we'll also talk about like what are the types of events and social gatherings that we want to see happening at Next Point. This is an incredible organization that we meet quarterly, and we have an executive team that also meets monthly, and we present, they present their recommendations to our executive leadership every quarter around these areas. But how do we move beyond just simply awareness, inclusion, and fostering a culture of belonging to one where we, to empathy and demonstrating leadership for all people and for this industry as a whole? We evaluate our recruitment efforts, our marketing, the way that we promote our events, and PTO policies. Like I said, it's one thing to document your PTO policies, but do you have a culture in which encourages PTO so that you're echoing your commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion? One way we encourage inclusion and empowerment for our employees to show up authentically is by simply putting your pronouns on your Slack channels and your email signature. This allows so that people can show up authentically to work. You'll see that I have this background behind me and I have my pronouns behind on top of me. And it's just a cool way to signal that you are able to show up authentically to work every day. And then, like you said, it's one thing to have a plan, but then how do you work that plan? So this is a long-term commitment and it's not an immediate win. One way which Next Point does this is through OKRs. We document our goals every quarter with an objective and then the key results that measure the success of that objective. Diversity, equity, inclusion is baked into those OKRs every quarter. And we have a yearly OKR around the commitment to diverse leadership development and developing leaders within our company and team potential. And then another way we do this is through just encouraging opportunities to interact with your coworkers in an authentic way. So we have something called Donut, which sets you up with a 15-minute randomized meeting in your company, and you're allowed to talk about everything and anything but work. So this allows you to simply show up and get to know your employees, get to know your coworkers in a way in which you're able to care for them beyond just the work that you do every day. You're able to care for the kids that they might have or their partner at home. And another way in which we do this is through our Start, Stop, Continue exercises. This is something that leaders across Next Point are encouraged to do quite frequently. And it's simply to where you write up on a board or somewhere, start, stop, continue, and it's a feedback session in which you're allowed to be frank and honest and have hard conversations around these things. And so are you continually addressing these elephants in the room, the unconscious biases that staff or employees have that influence their ability to implement these diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives at work? And so, like you said, Dianna, put your money where your mouth is. We evaluated the money that we spend on industry shows, and we wanted to invest in organizations that invest and align with the values that we have as a company. Rather than spending money on an industry show where there might not be a big return, we invested in an event like we're having tomorrow here in Chicago. If anyone's in Chicago, we're partnering with Women in E-Discovery to have with their summer social, just to encourage the representation of women in legal technology. And it's one thing to simply have representation of women across your leadership and your executive boards, but are you investing tangibly in those resources so that you're cultivating the next generation of leadership at your company, as well as in this industry? And then simply spend time together. I think that's one way in which Next Point does a great job. We, in the office in our Chicago headquarters, you're not allowed to bring your computer to lunch or have a working lunch. When they provide lunch every day, and you have to sit around the table with all your coworkers and talk about anything and everything but work. And it's the best way to understand who you are, get to know people, and then it allows you to have those connections that allow you to show up for others and champion others in ways in which you might not be able to if you don't know who they truly are or what they're passionate about.
That's awesome. I got a couple questions that just came through. The first one is, I sometimes don't want to try and help, but I'm terrified of saying, the wrong thing, especially in a meeting when I'm attempting to, include someone. Sometimes it's easier to not risk it. Anything specific you remember someone telling you during a meeting in your career that made you feel like you belong?
I think, for me, let me just tell you what I tell myself. That, I sit there and I think you got to know that you're worth it, that you add value. And sometimes you got to give yourself that pep talk. Mm-hmm. And I think there are times when I'm like, oh, I really don't want to shine a light in this direction. But I think if you tell yourself, if the roles were reversed, I would want someone else to feel comfortable, telling me. And so I think you just got to be bold. You got to be willing to open yourself up to risk. And, the big key thing, that I keep coming back to is you're worth it. Like what you say matters. Your opinion matters. Encouraging people to participate and feel included really makes people good people. Like that's what makes you want to get up and come to work and be around the people you're with. I think it's definitely not easy and it's uncomfortable, but it's like a muscle. You got to exercise it and it'll eventually get better.
Absolutely. I think one of the best pieces of advice as a leader I've received is instead of starting your meetings with how are you, ask what's on your mind. So it allows you to, instead of having an empty conversation around, oh, I'm good, I'm doing fine, it's hot outside, about your current situation. What's on your mind? I think that allows you to really show up and get a better understanding of who they are and what they're going through on that day. And yeah, it's just a small little habit change that I think I've tried to implement in my meetings, but I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I tell people all the time when they get involved with WBC and they get to hear my story, it's a little bit of what Dianna was saying, being bold and being sort of, filled with energy to be able to just go out there and do what you feel, is necessary for you. And the best piece of advice I've ever gotten was always put yourself out there. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't really take. And I take that with a grain of salt, knowing that sometimes conversations aren't going to go the way that I wanted them to go, but they're all learning lessons that I can improve on, beyond the future. I really got involved in WBC because somebody saw something in me and said, hey, just try it out. Even if you don't like it, you can always not go back. But in taking, that leap of faith, I really discovered that there are people that are going to champion you. They just don't know because you frankly haven't said anything, or you frankly, haven't put yourself out there. But once you do, there are people that are going to hold you up and they're going to help you and support you and make you feel inclusive. And to that, I wanted to ask, what is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship?
Absolutely. I think I will tell you, coming from having both been in the construction industry and in the legal industry, at both places I've worked, there has always been a formal mentorship program. And that's just it. It's formal. And it's, it's put in place, and people, they say, hey, I've got, I have to take you to lunch once a month, and I'm going to take you, and we're going to, we're gonna, I guess, tick off these things that we're doing to make sure that we're taking, moving forward. And I think the big difference between mentorship, which is great, don't get me wrong, like your firm should have a mentorship program to help grow your skill set. and make you better at what make you professionally where you need to be. That said, there is a big difference between that and sponsorship. And the difference is sponsorship, it's organic. It's, I'm taking an interest in you and I am going to shine a light on you. I'm going to help light a fire. I'm going to talk positively about you in public. I'm going to, raise accolades about you. And my whole purpose is to push you to be on the bottom of the ladder, pushing you up. And whereas a mentor really is at the top of the ladder and they're pulling you up. And so I think, that's the difference. And I think it's important, to be a sponsor for other people. I can tell you, I know here in the audience, Michelle West, who is a fantastic, wonderful attorney who I know, who's also in the construction industry. She befriended me right away after the last WBC event I was at. And I can tell you, she called me up and she said, hey, let's get coffee. And we got together and we sat down and we talked about life and everything else. And now I have a comrade, a partner, a person who I can talk to and talk about how do we grow? How do we get better? And I think it's important to be that person for people. And then when you're that person for someone else, I'm sure someone will be that for you. And so it's a lot about, providing this opportunity. So if you're in the, upper leadership or you're more advanced at your firm or your company, try to look to the people that are beside you and below you and pull them along and look for opportunities where you can provide that sponsorship. And if you're at the bottom and you're looking for someone to be your sponsor, you got to engage. You can't just answer the assignments. You've got to engage in some other way so that they feel connected to you. And just one more last quick little thing I'll tell you. When I was in law school, they put you through this whole rigmarole of trying to find a job afterwards because they want good rates. They want to say, hey, our graduates get hired right away. So there's all this pressure to go out and do these interviews. And I'll tell you what, I sent emails out every week and I started at the top, the biggest law firm, that had a government contracts construction practice, and I worked my way back. And I sent an email out and said, look, I just need 5 minutes. I see that you've made it. I see that you're the office managing partner or you're the head of this department. I want to do what you're doing. And I'd love to hear your story. I want to know what decisions you made. What did you do along the way to get to where you are? And there are some people that just ignore those emails, but there were a few that would pick up the phone and say, hey, let's talk. And by me asking them what they did and how they got to where they are and listening to what they, let them tell their story, they all of a sudden felt connected to me. And so I think sometimes part of that connection process, you don't even have to say much. You just got to ask the key questions. How did you get to where you are? What should I be doing? Do you have advice for me? And 9 times out of 10, by the time that 10-minute conversation is over, they're going to ask you in a few weeks how you're doing and what they can do for you.
I think we can all remember when you had a sponsor that really invested in you. And I think I love this conversation, especially because mentorship is that 2-way relationship, where sponsorship is the 3-way relationship between your sponsor, the protege, I guess, and the audience that you're trying to truly lift up and use the power that you have, your clout, to talk up, advocate for, and place that more junior person in a key role. And so, yes, mentorship is so important, but sponsorship is even more important to bringing in more diverse leadership. The true test is, how are you advocating for someone when they're not there? Are you championing someone and sponsoring someone when they're not in the room?
Absolutely. And so now, this is the key part. I know we're down to 10 minutes. It's like these hour-long presentations that go by so fast, but here's the important part. This is like what you should be tuning in for. Let's talk about, what do you do now? Like when you leave this call this afternoon, what do you do? Like, I mean, what do you think, Connor? What, can you talk about these 3 items?
Yeah, so when Diana and I were brainstorming this slide, especially, we started with listening, actually. And then we were like, hold on, there's another step that becomes before you even listen to the communities that you're in. And that's truly internalizing your worth. And Diana put it perfectly, you are not fungible. Spend your time with yourself and understand the worth, the true unique value that you provide, because your superpower is not replicable. Your experience, you cannot speak to the experiences of others, but you simply have your own experience to draw upon. But before you even listen to others of their experience, really internalize your own experience. And each person has their own unique gifts and talents that were cultivated by the community around you. The gift that you give back to your community is those gifts and talents that you can contribute to empowering others. So I'm a drag race aficionado. You can't love somebody else until you love yourself. There's something in that around the ability to care for others around you comes from truly understanding the worth and the unique superpower that you can provide to others.
And I will say 9 times out of 10, when you're uncomfortable or you're worried about having these conversations, if you just tell yourself, I'm worth it, like I should have this, I am valued, I have an opinion and it should be heard, it's a lot easier for the words to come out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And, speaking of words, so listen, and so here's step number 2, for those of you that either may be in this community, or maybe you want to be a sponsor and you're not quite in this affected community, but you don't know, what do you do? Well, you got to listen. And I can tell you, that's one complaint I have about the city, coming from a very suburban South, community, everybody is, how's the sweet tea? What'd you do on Sunday afternoon? They say hello, they make eye contact when they're walking down K Street. Like there's like, I see you. Whereas I feel like in the city, it's head down, earphones in. You say hi, how are you? But I'm walking. So like, did you respond? Did you answer that? I don't even know how you're doing. So I think the key here is to listen to what people are saying, not only what they're saying, but what is their body language telling you?
Mm-hmm. And then after you listen and truly digest what others in the community are saying, that's when you can engage. I mean, there's no, like we said earlier, there's no one right way of doing this. And this is not just the job of one person. You're not in this alone. You have a community around you that can also invest in you. There's this one Gandhi quote that's like, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits, and your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. I have that written right behind my computer because it's truly something in which you're not only internalizing your worth and engaging with the community around you, but these become habits once you start to practice them. At first, it's bumpy. I promise it is uncomfortable. But as you start to have these conversations more, as you start to ask more questions, you'll start to gain some comfort and safety with the people around you to have frank, honest conversations that once were hard, and maybe by the 5th or 6th time you're having these conversations, they're not as hard. And so truly it starts with that conversation and then it becomes action. And so,
I think Connor, too, just to list off a few things like that, the 3 things, we gave you 3 things that we think you should walk away with. But just in case, you need some more items, let's just run through a couple quick things that your company can be doing, and talk about some of the books that have influenced, where we got this information from.
Yeah, so I think write your diversity, equity, and inclusion language into your business core values, and get buy-in from all people, but especially executive leadership. It demonstrates your external and internal dedication to not only your company as a whole, but also all the clients that you work with. So that kind of documentation is important.
And if you're in leadership and you're on this call, what you can be doing is asking those people around you that are in these, that are parts, that are women, that are diverse, that belong to these different communities. Ask them what they need, and then help them, have them help you cultivate, that process. I think it makes it makes you aware of what issues may be. And two, it makes that person feel heard. And sometimes that's the most important thing you can do, is to make someone feel heard.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. Any questions from the crowd? We can engage. We have a little less than 4 minutes, so we can engage any questions anybody has for Connor or Dianna.
Well, if there aren't any questions, I will just want us to close with this. We wanted to give you a couple of our favorite books. If you have time this summer, definitely, take up a read. I love reading in paper. However, my schedule demands Audible, and I'm okay with that. So definitely have to put up props for Daring Greatly. Love Brene Brown. She is fantastic. She has a ton of other books out there. But one of the big things I want to mention that in Daring Greatly, you hear often, what would you do if you can't fail? Like, if you weren't going to fail, what would you do? And she really changes that question. She says, if you knew you were going to fail, what would you still do? Because it's worth it. It's worth the attempt. And that's, I think that's just a great way to look at things in this process, is knowing that it may not work. Am I still willing to attempt this item and make that adjustment and make that change? And I hope the answer you walked away with today is yes.
Yeah. For me, one of the most influential books I've read the last, I'd say, 10 years is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And I implore on everybody, that took the time to be a part of this presentation or show up to listen, just set 5 goals for yourself, set 5 DEI related goals, and then really read Grit. That's going to sort of help you, stay true to those goals. And we're talking long, achievable goals that are sectioned where you can see milestones of progress and really challenge yourself. I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to be passionate about it, and I'm going to persevere through, DEI, tough conversations, anything related, and really push yourself to really try to find and cultivate that community around yourself. And Grit really helped me do that whenever I was a part of something that's new or different, and I really wanted to develop, the passion for something. That book gave me just the utmost confidence to be able to sort of sit down and say, no, I am worth it. I can do this. I read it, and it made me feel good about myself. So I'm going to go out and chase the day.
And then as we come up on time here, I see we don't have any Q&As, but my book recommendation is something that we read at Next Point. And I plugged earlier, but it's Radical Candor. Be a kick-ass boss without losing your humanity. So this is a framework for just being a good leader. It's how do you care personally at the same time that you challenge directly. When you challenge without caring, it's obnoxious, aggressive, but when you care without challenging someone, it's empty empathy. And when you do neither of them, it's manipulative almost and insincere. And so it's a simple framework for you to build better relationships as a leader and have these hard conversations, and care personally as well as challenge directly. Perfect way to end the presentation. We're going to have our next speaker series in August, sort of reshaping how we view our community and ecosystem to add on to how we're thinking. Now we're going to take those actionable steps and show how we can sort of be more immersed in our community
And we really encourage everyone that was on this call to be able to call back within our August program. And I just wanted to, thank Dianna and Connor for volunteering their time to be able to talk to, this group. And I really appreciate all the things that you two have done. And I hope to have you guys back for another event.
Thank you, David.
David, everyone have a great rest of the day. And remember, take your 3 steps.
Yeah.
You're valued, listen, and engage.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.